evening. Welcome to Northbeat. I'm Megan Roberts in Edmonton. We begin our wildfire coverage tonight with some welcome news for people in Jean Marie River. The evacuation order for that community has been lifted and is now an evacuation alert. That means people who fled to Fort Simpson more than 10 days ago can now go home. But they need to be ready to leave again on an hour's notice. And when they get there, there may not be phone or internet services for them. Telecommunications are out once again in a number of communities. These are the latest images we have of the fires burning near Highway 3 in the South Slave. Crews are continuing to work there, and you can see fires have once again damaged the fire line. This is what crews are facing. According to Northwest Tel, there's currently no internet, landline, or cellular service in Kakiza or Jean Marie River. Long-distance landline phone service in Hay River and Fort Smith is also out. Earlier today, Northwest Tel announced that all services had been restored to the South Slave region after outages that began August 13th. But fire damaged service lines this afternoon, causing another outage. Officials say repairs will happen only when it is safe for technicians to work in the area. Customers in the Beaufort Delta can also expect a wait before repairs are made to the fiber line that's causing congestion in that region. Earlier today, Northwest Tel said 20 kilometers of new fiber has been laid down so far for repairs. Let's turn now to Mike Westwick. He's a wildfire information officer with the government of the Northwest Territories, a regular on our show lately, and he's here to tell us the latest on the fires. Mike, thank you again for joining us. I just talked about communication being down again in a number of communities. Has that been affecting your work with NWT Fire and the crews there?
So in terms of emergency response, we have contingencies for this. We work with satellite coverage for communication. We also use, of course, radio on the ground there. But of course, it's gonna make services like your own television, radio, all the more important in reaching folks as we continue to face down this very difficult fire season as folks look for information. So,
okay. Mike, I'll go to the South Slave. I just want to know what's happening with the fire around Hay River, the Katladeche First Nation, and Kakiza.
Yeah, so at this time, we're still looking at about 8 kilometers away from Hay River and about 10 kilometers away from the most populated areas of the Katladeche First Nation and about 14 kilometers away from Kakiza. And, you know, the conditions there have been extremely warm, extremely dry. We have, you know, fire behavior increasing significantly in the area. We've got variable wind directions. Conditions are very smoky there, especially around the airport. And that's really challenged some efforts to get aircraft in the air there, unfortunately. And we are expecting to continue to see some very challenging conditions there. The good news is that the team down there has done some really, really good work to prepare for this extremely difficult 48 hours. You know, they've been working on fuel breaks. They've been working with heavy equipment to do what's called tight lining, basically work at the edge of a fire perimeter to dig away vegetation for it to work with right there. And of course, a huge network of protections that's been set up alongside the town of Hay River and their fire department. It's a massive operation, lots of people doing really great work, and some very challenging days ahead. I do want to make that very clear to folks watching this who are from Hay River. There's challenging days ahead here.
You mentioned a tough 48 hours for people in and around Hay River. Are those conditions going to extend to Fort Smith as well? What can you tell me about that community?
Yes, again, that community is going to be experiencing a very tough 48 hours as well. We're still looking at about 4 kilometers south of the closest residence within Fort Smith and about 3.1 kilometers from the closest residence in Fort Fitzgerald there. You know, we've got conditions today, you know, 24 degrees, relative humidity of 28%. So, you know, the level of moisture in the air, anything below 30%, supports some pretty strong fire activity. Today we've seen winds from the west 5 to 10 kilometers an hour. It's picking up this evening. Expected to pick up to around 15 kilometers an hour and switch to south. There's no chance of precipitation there, and tomorrow is going to be an extremely challenging day in that area as well, with forecast levels reaching 28 degrees Celsius, 25% relative humidity in the area. Again, conditions expected to come from the south in terms of wind, 15 kilometers an hour, gusting up to 25 kilometers an hour, and coming from the south. These are conditions that would support fire moving closer to the communities we're working to protect. And the team there is doing absolutely everything that they can. That unified command to Alberta, Parks Canada, our government, doing everything they can to protect the communities there. It's a critical few days ahead and some really big challenges for folks there.
I almost feel like a broken record, but I know NWT Fire said today and tomorrow could also be crucial for the fire near Yellowknife in terms of weather, in terms of wind. Can you give me an update for that?
Yeah. So in terms of the winds today, we've been seeing westerly winds. We've seen fire activity pick up. The good news is today we've been seeing that activity occur within the existing fire perimeter. That's good. We've got teams working on that fire to do direct attack. Basically, we're putting boots on the ground and water directly on the fire's perimeter there. And this is going well so far. We're making good progress. And it's significant that that's in our toolbox. We've also had aircraft in the air, helicopters making drops with buckets to hit those hot spots. Tomorrow is going to be a challenging day as well. We're expecting to see southwest winds. We're expecting to see relative humidity reach about 30%. Again, you're in that range that can support burning. And those winds are expected to be quite strong. And we're, across all of these areas, we're expecting to see challenges with overnight recovery of that moisture. Normally when you have a fire area, at nighttime when temperatures drop, typically moisture rises quite significantly. It dampers fire activity. What we're seeing across all of these areas is a challenge with that recovery of humidity overnight. And what that leads to is a longer burning day with more active fire, basically less reprieve from that fire activity as a result of the environment not regaining some of that moisture. We are in a better place on the Yellowknife fires currently in terms of the fire activity, the significance of it all, than they are in the South Slave. I want to be very clear about that. But I also want to be clear that every single one of these communities, there remains threat. And these days are only going to, challenge these communities even further.
Okay. Thank you for the update tonight, Mike. That is Mike Westwick, a wildfire information officer with the GNWT. You just heard Mike talking about how challenging it is for the communities right now. Officials are saying it's absolutely not safe to return to any community under an evacuation order. In fact, roadblocks are set up along the highway into Yellowknife, the first at the junction of highways 1 and 2, the second between Yellowknife and Betchikol. The territory has actually updated its evacuation orders to say leave and don't come back. RCMP say they're going with a softer approach when dealing with this, but the penalties are real.
The Emergency Management Act does set out a range of consequences. It's up to but not exceeding a year in custody, and for an individual, it's less than up to but not exceeding a $5,000 fine.
More than 2/3 of the NWT's population is living outside the territory this week. Officials say they've been getting reports every day of people trying to get into Yellowknife, either to access supplies or check on their properties. Today, Yellowknife Mayor Rebecca Alty also addressed this situation. She says it's not always Yellowknife residents who are being stopped trying to get into the city.
I would say it's more residents in the Northwest Territories looking to come to Yellowknife for that supply chain issue of we don't have resources in our communities. We need to get into Yellowknife. And so, that's one of, I hear more about those incidents versus residents trying to come back from Alberta already. Yeah, it's good in Yellowknife, but it is concerning to get calls from, the residents of Little and Bechico, and, then I'm forwarding those calls on to the territorial government, and we hear the territorial government does have the working group up and operating now to address those supply chain issues. So hope that the food supply in the Clecho region as well as in Little are resolved.
The wildfires burning near Yellowknife are also raising concerns about Giant Mine and the 237,000 tons of arsenic trioxide stored there deep in the ground. People are asking what happens to that toxic dust if the ground above it burns. The CBC's Leni Lambrink spoke to the head of the Giant Mine remediation project to find out.
If a fire were to come at Giant Mine's doorstep, is there any risk that the arsenic trioxide would be released into the environment?
No, there's no risk. You have to remember that trioxide is between 80 and 250 feet below ground. It's entombed in rock, and there's really no way for fire to get in at it. And so there's really no risk to that aspect there. And if you look at the kind of the infrastructure on the surface, of course, if the low risk happened, that fire did get in there, I mean, obviously the buildings could burn. And then what we would do is when it was safe to go back into the site, we would assess the damage at that time and react accordingly. We may have to adjust our remediation plans for how we deconstruct some of those buildings if they're impacted. But, when it was safe to do so, we would go in and verify what would need to be done.
So what were some of the things that Giant was concerned about and needed to get ready for?
Our biggest concern is, part of managing the arsenic trioxide in the underground is to ensure that water doesn't impact those stopes. So we keep the mine in a dewatered state. And by that, I mean we keep the water at a level well below those arsenic trioxide stopes. So to do that, we have a pumping system that does that. So it essentially, when water comes into the underground, we pump it up on surface and store it in our northwest pond, and that stays there until every summer, where we treat it and then discharge it to the environment. So that cycle is a closed loop cycle. We keep those pumps keep running and keep the level where it should be.
Was power completely turned off to the site at one point? That seemed to be the messaging.
No, that was some original messaging, yeah, but we recently confirmed this week that power was not shut off to the site, and it continues to operate those pumps and some other auxiliary pumps on site.
So what would happen if power was completely turned off at the site under circumstances that Giant couldn't control because of a wildfire?
Yeah, absolutely. So those pumps that I talked about that keep the water in the mine water in dewatered state, if we were to lose those pumps by, say, with fire or whatnot, the time it would take for the water to rise up to the lowest part of the arsenic trioxide stopes, and we really don't want to saturate that dust. That would be our biggest risk. You're looking at upwards of 2 years before that would even reach there, with absolutely no intervention at all to be able to fix that. So you can imagine in 2 years, we would have time to react and get new pumps and fix that system.
As we mentioned earlier, Kakiza is once again without any means of communication. That means no phones and no internet. That was also the case last Thursday, when an evacuation order was issued for the community. And because there were no telecommunication services, no one in Kakiza got that message. Juanita Taylor went to the community to discover what happened.
The streets of Kakiza are empty now that most of its 40 residents have left. An evacuation delayed, explains the chief.
No, we didn't hear about it. We didn't know until we'd seen on the TV.
An evacuation order was issued for Kakiza on August 17, but people here didn't learn about it that day. That's because their telecommunication system was down.
We didn't see no smoke and no fire, so there was no emergency at the time.
Evacuees from Kakiza were expected in Fort Simpson, 320 kilometers away. After 24 hours when no one was showing up, the mayor of Fort Providence, an hour's drive to Kakiza, was asked to check what was going on.
I drove down and I talked to them, and they said, well, no one told them they're supposed to evacuate.
Turns out the fire had destroyed the fiber optic line that Kakiza relies on for internet, cell service, and phone lines. The wildfire of 2014 came very close to burning Kakiza to ashes. This one is 14 kilometers away, and a handful of residents aren't leaving, including Ryan Moore.
I'm not going away.
He's chosen to stay and to try to protect his community.
We're doing some fire breaks here, and there's not many people around town, so we only have limited labor around here. It's a small community, so just do my part.
Caroline Wozniak is the territory's finance minister.
That's what brought us down last Sunday. We didn't have the redundancy. It's something that we continue to push for so that we can find the funding to get there.
Those who stayed behind are keeping their eyes on the sky. Juanita Taylor, CBC News, Kakiza, Northwest Territories.
Yesterday, we heard from NWT MLAs Janeway Ellen Armstrong and Katrina Knockleby sharing their concerns about this mass evacuation. Tonight, we have the final part of that conversation. I asked the MLAs how they thought the GNWT was going to bring everyone back when the time comes. Here's the response.
I can clearly tell there is no plan. I wrote emergency response plans for jobs that I've been on, projects I was on as an engineer. When I worked for Deton Chonuna, I helped write Giant Mines, or wrote most of Giant Mines' emergency response plan at the time. The way that they have done this, none of this has been what you would do when you are an emergency response planner. You would war game out scenarios, you would have each and every emergency that under the sun that you could think of, you would have the contracts in place with contractors ahead of time. At the end of the day, there was no plan. And when I started to ask about a plan in committee, I was told to go look to the city because it was the city's responsibility. Yet I have spent almost 4 years listening to how the city is underfunded, there's no capacity, and watching communities around the NWT struggle with climate disasters while the government tells them that it's the responsibility of the community themselves to adapt to this climate change, these emergencies, when they're clearly all underfunded and totally lack any sort of capacity. As an engineer who has taken an oath to protect public safety, and as an MLA who took an oath to the people of this territory, I am appalled at what has happened here. Anybody that has any sort of background in this will tell you that none of this was planned out. And the fact is there should be an inquiry or an inquest of some sort by the federal government about how there has been such mismanagement by the territorial government to allow this to happen.
It's NWT MLA Katrina Knockleby. We turn again tonight to our NWT Indigenous language broadcasters to bring us the latest fire news in their languages. Here's Cecilia Boyd and Jimmy Hope.
Emergency Management Coordinator de Giandiora Yisida Yinake de what us at Netsa and Lauke see who's eating a them. I added Magnap de Giandiora is a dignity in its not so a desmond I both eating a them. Hagosani de a condom connected on a like it does it. Nisi alageda chingune diode the manap de diode did that see go nege de go see nichi na tsune de what nichi upon which like on the Sunday a good dane get diode the din home was that you about Saturn said that you consider ye bear route on yin dig gungi who diode and was that don't say that comatan I get diode. I bear rats on about Sunday and a Cape Point a G. Chimode, I get and give who do there. The house on a bear rats as soon as not done I get the them. I did this, I can get this that gets on, I get some cornies and give more corn, I get some to put less house and give who do there. I did get you, I used that Monta, what I connect quickly, honey, tea get honey, lots of dance at Hanigia, go up and get you there. The youth are this as a son, they get due them. The man napped it, due in design tower, a use that good niggas, the handsy course is not a crazy, what does having done is in a get due there, what does in not so get consent on the quick, let's done get due them. han det ja adiu da disi da det han susun ke konsi what nisi la kus ihti la tsed da diu de la kha la tsed da khonat sanat e khodan tsimut han ha la tsed da ne ge diu de da man nap de ja diu da yi backgrounds and tuna no le de tan no la khodan na ge diu de de jisu motasin ko sha la ge da diu da is essential service a go diu de de dia diu da tunsi da khonde ne ge de ta go tsai fi la ge une de dis gis holi de da motas de dis trase go ingos a ge dine diu de da din hon wusi da ko ne ge de ge ko da go tin si da hazon la sa dine diu da ayi da la sa dis a hine de what a don sa de si what a ya nya la ge tsai kwine diu de han ni wa si la sa de la ge tsai kwine diu de da tunsi da yi ha ba sa go diu de asi
tu hena gune zunde kamasi sezel jam hopsi je okisa to ta se je guzna CBC North Radio 1 kila de chod de awla serato so jundi sa ta guzna jwathi ti jong adinson guzna junda sa ta guzna la jwathi ti asodi ta ti koni na tse khari sila de thale de chin ta kho di khandi tse kila kondi londe tenen da ami ko khya khara mi la ko the de chin ta kho di kondi la jundi sa ta de ko tse khya sa te la 그대모는 데 알버타 지라 뉴진이다. 때는 다음에 좀 아든텐 그중에 라가 Red Cross에서 그거다. 나한테 데 컨디고가 그 카기네 책. 컨디고란 달라이 뒤에 그 퀴리 호텔에다 시 컨디고가기 안데라 이지고딘 센터 때오게 엑스포 센터 이지라기니 달라이 하즈이 건데 에테메다 미케 나츠 테코니 센터 레코니 카스 지코니께서 나기네테 Because the country landed a summer met and there are two hotel night in Deus and it's not the two limits or in this only. Because you could in the South think could the nothing the Conical Cabinet Red Cross go here, some really does so again. We got don't causing only could cure could have that son of the player kickers in from Ile. Lawrence the Londla stand on the Etetnila tight, and hotel room Giagi, Akoni Salary, hit a sin on the Teconibet Sally, the Tenadaka Tiragia meet that the Teke Honico Zelendela Nagini decorates Olagua could a GKT. Because at the Lonka Tiraji continues on the Colibe ban, obviously could tons Dule, Shata India, some Lady Lendela Dule Cognition, Kagitia, the Kuzenti teaching actually dynamic current local NWT Evacuation Katikoni Ejetland evacuation or guided in Dela Dures Lily Melgotan Dure knows in Digi and Dela Dure say good session Dure Kunazan at it. So many Kunas at the RCMP second at the Corporal Matt Halstead Tinkatiraji. Tiutanai Tenami could now get the Koniga Ketchagi Tindelaji, Kotsongan de Kotanjo, Tasiko, the Siko Kondi Kagitinga Guag, Nagini de Koniko could Jin Divan, Dashula Kochangu de Kotsashula could get Ageti. Condiola Tenamico Chan Deni any Delendeta Dire, Messenger Tindi.
A retired Quebec judge was in Rankin Inlet this week, investigating how the Oblates handled past allegations against former Nunavut priest Johannes Revoir. Andre Denis, who you see pictured here, is leading the investigation, called the Oblate Safeguarding Commission. It'll look at how allegations of sexual abuse against Revoir were handled. Denis says he also traveled to Churchill, Manitoba, and will be in Winnipeg over the weekend, and he also visited Lyon in France, where Revoir lives. Revoir has faced charges of abusing Inuit children while working as a priest in Nunavut. He worked in the territory from the 1960s until he went to France in 1993. A final report from Denis will be made public in April of 2024. A construction boom in Old Crow, Yukon is nearing its end, but things are not over just yet. Work on a new Yukon government 10-plex and a new health center is still underway. And as Cheryl Kawaja reports, the community is gaining more than new buildings. It's also developing skills and capacity.
The crew here is working full out. 10-hour days, 7 days a week, some 21 days straight.
But right now we're putting up cladding on the exterior of the building. That took a long time to get to this point, so it's really nice to finally get to the stage.
Some of the crew have been at this for a year and a half, since a winter road helped to get the bulk of materials here.
It feels good to come back to Old Crow and do it, and to be able to build something and that somebody is going to use for a long time to come, you know, and it's going to help the community out.
This is the biggest construction boom Old Crow has seen in decades. The Fly-In community now has a new elders facility, completed this spring. Now the push is on to finish a new 10-plex housing unit and a new health center. All much needed, says the Vuntutquitchin chief. And in addition to building new facilities, she's pleased to see so many citizens working.
So this is a huge opportunity for us to build capacity in the community as well, with the electricians and plumbers and, you know, the carpenters and just general laborers. You know, we have cooks working now at the camp that are Vuntutquitchin, which is, you know, I'm pleased about all that. Yeah.
Oh, it's busy. Sometimes we hardly have time to do anything else at the end of the day. But to be part of something like this in the hometown's been pretty good, working with a lot of people from here, especially the young people, getting them started out in their trade, and being part of that development's been pretty good.
Work on the housing unit and the new health center is expected to wrap up before the new year. Cheryl Kawaja, CBC News, Old Crow.
The Teslin Tlingit Council and the Yukon government have signed an agreement which will allow the territory to buy heat generated at the biomass facilities in Teslin. The Katinasa Community School in Teslin is the next building in the community to harness biomass. The project will reduce the school's annual greenhouse gas emissions by 106 tons. It came online yesterday for the first day of school.
Basically, we're just replacing diesel fuel for heating space with wood chips for heating space. So it's offsetting, I think we're going to be offsetting close to like 100,000 plus liters a year of heating fuel. This school is just another building added to our already successful biomass infrastructure project.
This current system is supplying heat to over 10 local buildings. Unused wood is being converted into pellets and burned to create heat. The project started in 2017 and now produces about 1.5 megawatts of heat for the community. And that is Northbeat for tonight. We leave you with some photos showing the defense of Yellowknife against wildfires today. These are some of the fire breaks and sprinkler systems set up around the Cam Lake area. There are about 125 Canadian Armed Forces members in the city helping out, and earlier today, Yellowknife's mayor thanked them all. If you are still in Yellowknife, there's a chance to get a flight out. You can call the number on your screen to arrange travel. Thank you for watching. I'm Megan Roberts. Have a good night.